Good afternoon, folks. We'll since we were right on time, maybe not quite as late as I was Sunday morning, being an hour late, but we're just a few minutes late. So we're glad to have you here for this meeting of Game Fishing Parks. We appreciate everyone being here. We're going to we'll begin our meeting by asking Representative Donahue to open us with a word of prayer. If you'll listen to him at this time. Emory?
Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day, Lord, and we thank you for your many blessings. Lord, we pray that you be with each family here represented, that, Lord, you put your shield of protection around each one. Be with our meeting, that we help, Heavenly Father, to open our ears, open our hearts. Help us to understand what we're talking about today. Give us the wisdom that we need. All these things we pray in Jesus' precious name. Amen.
Thank you, Emory. We appreciate those words. Members, we appreciate y'all being here. We'll recognize Senator John Bullock, Chairman of the Agricultural Committee in the Georgia Senate. And I can't even say the name of that place you're from, Senator Bullock. I know you'll help me on that. Let's see. I think you're on witness one. We appreciate you bringing this bill. We appreciate you being here. Senator, one footnote before we get into Senate Bill 301. Senator Bullock and I have agreed that we would have the purposes for this day. This bill would be heard for hearing purposes only. We will not have a vote on that. So we appreciate Senator Bullock in helping us to inform this committee as to the issues that are involved in this bill. And Senator Bullock, we appreciate it. And we actually realize that the seniority comes first over in the Senate. So these freshman legislators that are following you today, we're going to let them just do just that. We're going to let them follow you, and I know there won't be an objection there. So we appreciate you being here, and thank you for your work in the Senate and for Ag, and appreciate it. We'd love to hear from you right now, if you don't mind.
Chairman Burns, I certainly appreciate this opportunity today, and I'm glad that you set aside 2 hours for this hearing. It's such a complicated bill, and I don't know who this lady is, but she's having trouble with her microphone up here, and if it does it again, I'm going to throw it across towards her.
Well, Mr. Ag Chairman, I've heard you and my sweet mate, the Ag Chairman in the House, get started before, and I like to allow plenty of time when y'all just talk about normal things. So,
I understand.
In this situation, we want to have plenty of time for you.
And there's probably going to be times that y'all may ask me questions that I can't hear what you say, because being a farmer and being a hunter, I'm about 3/4 deaf, and I'm one of those procrastinators. I won't go get a hearing aid. My ears are kind of ringing like I've shot a 30-06 this morning. So just kind of a little pun for this bill. Thought I'd get a laugh, and nobody did. So
it's obvious you need to stay in the Senate, not to go in the comic circuit. I can tell you that.
I thank Mr. Chairman. You put some information in each of the committee members' folders. In the folder, there's a letter that was written to the editor in the Moultrie Inquirer from an attorney that probably explained the benefits of a silencer and what this bill does better than I can, and that's the reason I shared it with you. I don't even know this gentleman, even though he's my constituent. I probably need to get to know him. Then I put in there, because I know all of you are anxious to run out and apply for a permit, and the federal form that you have to fill out is in your folder. Now, this bill doesn't do but one thing, and it takes away the prohibition on the game and fish laws that you cannot hunt with a weapon that has a silencer suppressor on it. Now, that's all this bill does. Of course, there are a lot of people thinking that this bill legalizes suppressors. Suppressors are already legal in Georgia, and that application is what it takes to get a permit to own a silencer. Now, all of us watch too much television, and we see the bad guy take a gun, screw a silencer on the end of the gun, and he shoots David Knight down there, and all you hear is boom. Well, that's not what a silencer suppressor does. You can't take away, when you shoot a high-powered rifle, the breaking of the sound barrier when that bullet comes out of that gun. you're taking away the combustion part of that shot. And on a low caliber gun, and we're talking about hunting. Now, yeah, you can shoot squirrels with a .22. You don't deer hunt with that. Most all of the rifles that you deer hunt with, or you shoot wild feral hogs with, those weapons break the sound barrier. So you're not going to take away that noise of breaking the sound barrier. Another thing is that you can't get a silencer to put on a shotgun unless you're shooting a slug. You can't get it to put on there if you're going to go duck hunting or quail hunting or whatever you may want to hunt. That doesn't work on a shotgun. So, and when you look at that application for a suppressor silencer, and we have several companies in the state of Georgia that manufacture them. And in fact, I have one in my district down in Donaldsonville, Georgia. So these are, I was amazed to find out after I introduced this piece of legislation at how many people that I knew that had silencers. I don't have one, folks. I mean, I'm not here doing this because I want to go hunt with a silencer. In fact, I hadn't been deer hunting other than sitting in the stand with my grandson that's 6 years old 2 weeks ago. He hadn't learned how to shoot a gun big enough to kill a deer, but he can shoot a gun. He owns a .22 rifle, and I've promised him my father's .22 pistol when he gets old enough and responsible enough. He thinks he's there now because I already let him shoot it. But he loves to go out in the woods. And we sit in the deer stand and we watch the deer. I hadn't killed a deer in 14 years, but I've probably killed 200 deer in my life. So this is not about me. This is not something that I'm doing for me. It's for everybody. When we look at the encroachment of our rural hunting lands by residential developments, and I've had several sheriffs tell me that, oh, this is a great thing. During hunting season, the biggest complaints I have is somebody in a residential area that backs up to a hunting area, they hear a gunshot, and they just get all excited because they heard that gunshot. He said, I hope everybody on that hunting club gets them a silencer so I won't have as many complaints. It's all about you having an option when you go hunting if you want to have a silencer on your weapon. Now, you can own a silencer. You can have a silencer to go out and target shoot and practice because that's all legal. You just can't hunt with a weapon. I presented this to the department and they had a suggestion and I took that suggestion. They wanted to increase the penalty that if somebody broke the law hunting with a silencer, suppressor, that we would increase the penalty. It's already illegal to hunt on another person's property without permission. That penalty, if you're caught, they can suspend your privileged hunting license for up to 2 years. It's illegal to hunt at night with a gun. The suspension is up to 2 years, suspension of your privileged license. And they can also take away your vehicle and your gun. If you're hunting on property that is restricted from hunting, and we have a lot of federal lands and we have a lot of state lands that are restricted, you can't hunt on them. So this just adds on that if you go and hunt on that, the penalty is increased from 2 years to 3 years that you lose your privileged license. One of the biggest things that I've heard is that as a property owner, I want to hear that person when they shoot and they're poaching on my property. Well, the first thing is that man's already breaking the law. He's on your property without permission. He's not going to go get a legal silencer. He's not going to fill out an application that requires him to go to the chief law enforcement, that's on that application. The chief law enforcement officer has to sign this application. Where I live, that's the sheriff. Some of you may live within a incorporated city limit. You can go to the police chief. But the sheriff or the police chief has got to sign that application or you don't get a permit to own one. You have a background check. You're fingerprinted. All of these things that you have to go through, these are things that law-abiding citizens don't mind doing. So the fear that somebody's going to be poaching on your property and hunting with a silencer, folks, he's already a crook. He's already breaking the law. And he doesn't care about breaking the law with an illegal silencer. They're available today. I'd say that within 5 or 6 blocks of where we're standing right now, that you could go buy a silencer if you had enough $100 bills in your pocket. And that silencer would not be registered to anybody. You can go on the internet and they tell you how to make one. So it's not that we're talking about a real sophisticated instrument here. Of course, the higher powered rifle you have, the more sophistication there is. And then the real kicker and cost is you've got to go to a gunsmith to have that gun adapted for that silencer to fit on. And that's going to take and cost money. So when we get back and when we look at what does a silencer really do, and there's more information about silencers than I even wanted to know. Most suppressors lower the sound level with a high-powered rifle from 160 decibels to about 130 decimal points. Now, this is 10 decimal points below the threshold of pain and level that typically won't damage your ears when you get it down to that 130 decimal points. Anything above 140 is considered threatening to your hearing and your ears. So there are a lot of benefits that go along with having a silencer suppressor on a gun. And if you're an outdoorsman and you enjoy hunting, this is just something else that could give you a little more enjoyment because it doesn't hurt your ears. It won't hurt your grandson's ears or your granddaughter's. My 3 daughters, I carried all 3 of them hunting. In fact, my oldest daughter killed the last deer that's been killed in our family. And I bought her a high-powered rifle when she was 18 years old. Of course, then she got married and her husband took it away from her, but that's part of it. I told her that she always ought to keep that gun and she always have him scared of her. So, Mr. Chairman, I think I've explained what the bill is. I've tried to explain some of the concerns I've heard out of other people. I've tried to provide y'all with information dealing with what it really means to apply for to the Federal Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms Division of the federal government to be able to get a permit. That application, you can't buy one silencer and use it on 10 guns. A silencer is permitted to a gun by serial number, by model number, by make. That application even tells you that if that silencer goes into an estate, how you've got to dispose of it. You've got to, and if you can't cross a state line without getting permission to carry that silencer across the state line. These are extremely highly regulated instruments, and there's 16 states, I think is the number, that allow for hunting with silencers. It's not that, 39 states allow for private ownership, 15 states allow for hunting with them. I guess I was under the assumption that we'll pass it in Georgia, so that makes 16. That's where the 16 came from. This is not a first thing, we're the only one doing it kind of a situation. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll be glad to try to answer any of your questions or any of the committee's questions.
We'll ask some questions. You know, if these were Georgia regulations, we'd turn it over to Chairman Knight's Red Tape Committee, and he'd take care of all that red tape there, Mr. Chairman.
That's what we should do.
Representative Dobbs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator. My question is, has there been any discussion about the effect of these silencers on the safety of hunting? By not hearing the hunting going on, is that going to affect other hunters?
I guess it would be kind of like anything else that you can assume that because you don't hear as much and high of a decimal point blast that you may not would hear somebody. If you own property, as I own property and lots of y'all own property and you have hunting property, I know when people have permission to be on my property. I know pretty close to where they're going to be. And if you're a good hunter, you don't get down out of a deer stand and just walk through the woods if you have other hunters in the area. But there's always that possibility, whether you've got a suppressor or not, that you have people that shoot movement. And if you think that you're going to hear the blast of that gun to where you can get out of the way of it, if they shooting at you, you dead before you ever hear that blast, because that bullet's going to get there first. So I really don't think, there's no statistics that are out there that I've been made aware of that show that this creates any greater hazard. No ma'am.
Thank you.
Other questions for the chairman? Representative Jaspers.
Hey, thank you, Chairman Bullock, and for bringing this bill. Because I'm in one of those transitional areas you described earlier. It's growing. A lot of folks and folks in my area appreciate this bill, and because it really lets them choose whether they want to use one or not. But one question I had, and I didn't see it in here, was if it's on your personal property, can you already use a silencer or not? What's the, if it's on your property, and I know because you can hunt without the license, the general license, but
no, the
I don't
prohibition in Georgia is you cannot hunt with a silencer on a gun.
Period. Okay.
Legally.
Key word. Other questions for the chairman? Very good job, Chairman Bullock. We appreciate your time being here. I know that hopefully you can stick around. If you can't,
I'll be glad to stay around if there's other questions that may arise. And
I know you have some other important.
Well, I'm sorry that I didn't take up 2 hours.
Well, you were working on it, but we were going to use that gong, but you made it. We appreciate you, Senator Bullock. Appreciate you bringing the bill. We have a couple of folks that would like to speak, and I think it'd be beneficial to the committee to hear some comments from some folks that are interested. So as we educate ourselves on this subject, Mr. Knox Williams. Knox is from here in Atlanta. Knox, if you'll come up and introduce yourself and tell us who you're with, and we'd love to hear from you. If you can give us 2 or 3 minutes, that'll be fine, and maybe take a question when you finish. We'd appreciate it.
Yes, sir, absolutely. Thank you all for letting us come and speak. My name is Knox Williams. I work with the American Silencer Association, and we are a new nonprofit representing the silencer industry in a similar fashion to the NRA with the gun industry. First, I'd like to give you a brief history of our industry to kind of go over some common misconceptions. They can be referred to as either a silencer or a suppressor, and actually the term silencer was coined by Hiram Percy Maxim in 1909 when he patented the first commercially available silencer. Prior to 1934, they were not regulated in any fashion. However, with the National Firearms Act of 1934, they became regulated federally in the same fashion as short-barreled rifles and machine guns. This regulation has stayed the same. It's been amended several times in 1968 with the Gun Control Act, but they are federally regulated in every state in the country and have been since 1934. The Senator touched on kind of the process to go through with it. If a civilian is to order a silencer, they do have to pass a BATFE background check. They have to pay a $200 one-time transfer tax per item, and it has to stay in their possession. If they want to transfer it to another individual, they have to go through the process again. So this is something that is transferring to an individual that must stay in their dominion and control. Touching on some of the safety issues. Silencers are are not silent in any way. As the Senator said, for centerfire rifle, your standard hunting rifles, under the best circumstances, you're going to take the gun down to about 130 to 135 decibels. Now, to give you perspective, that's about as loud as a jackhammer or a jet engine. OSHA regulates noise levels and determines what is technically hearing safe, and they have stated that 140 decibels is the threshold for hearing safe levels for an impulse noise. Now, hearing safe levels go down in decibels as you increase exposure time. This is specifically just for an impulse noise, so a crack, like a bullet or a gunshot. Well-manufactured silencers do take it under hearing safe levels, but still at 130 decibels. That's a very loud noise when taken out of context. To kind of give you the science behind silencers, really all they are is a muffler on the end of a gun. They're taking out one of the largest noise sources in regards to guns, which is the muzzle blast. That's all that they're eliminating, period. There are several other noise factors, including bullet flight, as the Senator said, especially when you're using supersonic ammunition, which almost all of your hunting ammunition is. Silencers do represent one of the largest and fastest growing segments in the gun market, in the gun industry. Nationally, many states are deregulating them and allowing them to be owned by their civilians. It is, while federally regulated, controlled by every state. And many states throughout the country are beginning to allow their use while hunting. We'd like to see Georgia do the same. And right now, there's about 5 other states, including Texas, Oklahoma, Indiana, and Arizona, that are all considering similar legislation. In regards to hunting, one of the largest concerns with safety is tinnitus and noise-induced hearing loss. That's caused by not wearing hearing protection and being exposed to gunshots. If you speak with any hunter who's really over the age of about 15, you know that they probably have some form of hearing loss, some level of hearing loss, because they've been exposed to unprotected gunshots. While silencers take it below hearing safe levels, that is a legitimate safety factor that they can overcome. They are basically a hearing protection device that affixes to the end of the muzzle that protects not only the shooter but those around them, which is especially beneficial if you're an adult taking out a young child. You want to be able to have complete command and control of verbal communications throughout to make it a safe endeavor. This is one way that you can do that.
Would you take a question?
Absolutely.
Roger, we got one for you. Representative Williams.
Thank you. I'm glad to see that the senator yield the remainder of his 2 hours to you. But my question primarily is kind of twofold. First, you explained the difference, very little in the decimal sound. Why do you need a suppressor if it doesn't suppress any noise? Because I keep hearing about there is not going to be any noise. So what's the purpose of a suppressor when you've indicated that there's such a little difference until you won't hardly notice it? The next thing is, I'm impressed that you must be looking for a real land sale business. We already got an organization put up to set up suppressors. What you go call yourselves?
We're called the American Silencer Association.
Okay.
We are a new organization that formed actually last August, and we represent several manufacturers within the industry, looking to expand it to the whole
Tell
industry.
me about the noise level.
Okay. To give you more of a background.
No, don't background me. Just tell me about the difference in what you get now and what you get when you put the suppressor on.
So
I heard the background.
On a standard centerfire rifle, you're looking at about 165 to 175 decibels unsuppressed. Now, decibels are logarithmic in nature, meaning that every 3 decibels you increase or decrease, you're either going to double or half the sound, or at least that's your perception within your ear. Silencers take it down to about 130 to 140 decibels if they're well engineered. Some don't ever meet the hearing safe levels, but it's still decreasing it, the perceived sound level by half every 3 decibels that you go down. So it's going to depend on your host firearms. It's going to depend on your ammunition. It's going to depend on your location, if you're in the woods, in a field, even barometric pressure and the weather outside is going to determine the sound levels that you're actually going to get. So there's a lot of variables to go into play, but as a general rule of thumb, somewhere between 160 down to about 130, 35 decibels.
Representative Bruce.
I got a quick question. I go to the pistol range, and so I hear the noise. I put on earmuffs.
Yes, sir.
I don't hear the noise anymore. Why wouldn't you just do that? And that way, if you have other people in the area, whether they're supposed to be there or not, is not really the question that I'm concerned about. If they are in fact there for whatever reason, it would be nice to know that there's somebody X distance away from you with a high-powered rifle shooting it. So why not just put on the earmuffs if it's only going to reduce it by, you know, 20, 30% or whatever you just said? Why not just put on some earmuffs?
Most hunters aren't going to do that because they're still trying to maintain situational awareness. If you're out in the field, you're deer hunting, you know, you're listening out. Oftentimes you can hear the game before you can see it. If you have earmuffs on or in, you're not going to be able to localize the sound because you're probably not going to hear it. That's why most hunters don't use traditional passive or even electronic hearing protection when they go hunting.
I mean, but once you've spotted it or heard it, then put them on and shoot it.
Have you heard of buck fever?
Buck fever?
Yes, sir.
I can't say that I have.
Buck fever is just kind of a, yeah.
I grew up in Harlem, in New York. I hadn't heard of that.
So buck fever is kind of the phenomenon, you know, you see a deer, you get so excited that you just zone in and focus on it, and you're not going to do anything except try and shoot that deer. Most people aren't going to take the time, and they're afraid that if they do put in their hearing protection, they're going to spook the animal. Anybody that goes hunting knows that you can fart loud and the deer will spook. You know, it's
Okay.
Thank you, Knox.
With that, I'm done.
Knox, we've had some interesting hearings in the last couple of times, and that moves this right along. Thank you. We appreciate your. I don't think we have any further questions. We appreciate you being here.
Thanks,
and
sir.
thanks for your comments. We have Mr. Kevin Brittingham. Kevin, you still here? Representative Williams, Miss Olivia, tell me that you have loss of hearing, but it's selective loss of hearing is what she says. She's kind of like Miss Dale on that same deal with us. Yeah, no doubt both of them are right then. Kevin, good to have you. If you tell us who you're with, or if you're introduce yourself, we'd appreciate it.
Thank you. Yes, sir. I'm Kevin Brittingham. I'm a founding member of the American Silencer Association, and I was the founder and president of Advanced Armament Corporation, which is in Georgia, which is probably the largest silencer company in the world at this point, from 1994 to 2011. Well,
Thank you. Take off.
Thank
Appreciate
you, guys. A couple things as far as I wanted to address, as far as the safety issue, where I'll say and what you asked about the hearing protection and the silencer. We'll start with the noise as well, which is kind of difficult to explain when you start talking about decibels, and a lot of people don't understand it, and it is very complicated. There are two sounds when you fire a gun. The first sound is when you squeeze the trigger, the firing pin hits the primer of the cartridge. That powder ignites, or that ignites the powder in the case, which transforms into gas under extreme high pressure, which pushes your bullet out of the barrel. When that hot gas hits the oxygen in the atmosphere, that's where an explosion occurs. And that's the sound that damages your hearing. And that's what a silencer can basically mask. The next sound is the bullet breaking the sound barrier, which is the same sound as when someone cracks a whip. The tip of the whip actually breaks the sound barrier. That's why a whip is so loud. So that's the sound that you hear. And the bullet maintains the sonic flight and that sound throughout the air. That's why someone can still hear it. if you're hunting on a piece of property, like I have 300 acres, and if my brother and I are hunting and he's on one end of the property, I'm on the other, he still hears when I shoot. It's just, it's safe for me to shoot without ear protection because I have the ear protection on the end of the gun. And for situational awareness, like I also have an 8-year-old that I hunt with. So for him, yeah, we miss a lot of game because he has to hunt with the ear protection and me trying to communicate with him when it's okay to shoot and when it's not. It's not as safe as of a situation as it would be if we had the silencers on the weapon, because then I can communicate with him. So when I taught him to shoot, that's how we shoot. When we go to the range that we've built on our property, he shoots with a silencer because I can talk to him and speak to him and doesn't have to wear the ear protection on his head. So those are the two noises, and that's what people really don't understand and have a hard time explaining, but the explosion at the gun and the bullet flight. For instance, my neighbors this weekend's the first time I've shot a lot at my range without a silencer, and they didn't know I had a gun range, and so the deputy sheriff showed up because of the noise complaints, and they asked how long I'd had the range. And I said, well, I've had the range 1.5 years, and it's the first complaint because it's the first time really using the range without it. So from a safety standpoint, I think the hearing protection, the hunters not wearing the hearing protection is probably the biggest advantage. And then from a medical standpoint too, preserving your hearing. One way to look at it is everything that makes a loud noise is mandated by the government to have a muffler on it. People call them silencers, and it kind of makes it seem sinister. And that's probably the help of cable television or something, but it's a muffler. And you can't buy a car without a muffler. You can't go to a Home Depot and buy a weed eater or a lawnmower without a muffler. It's mandated by the government that it has to have it. Firearms are the only thing that makes this loud of a noise that the muffler is actually regulated. And so it's kind of contradictory. I mean, this is the only country in the world where firearms are readily available and the silencer is regulated. You know, in European countries where there's still firearms are illegal and people still hunt, the silencers or the mufflers are not regulated by the government. You just buy them in the gun store, hardware stores, and it's the way it was here until 1934. So,
any questions from the committee for Kevin? I have one, Kevin. How far is your range from your home or from your neighbor's home?
My neighbor's home, about a half mile.
So, with the suppressor, on events, different sorts of weather and everything else, where wind blowing in different directions, your neighbors knew a half mile away you didn't even have a range. Is that what I heard you say?
They didn't know. And what the sound, if you're that far away, you still hear a sound, but it sounds pneumatic, maybe like a nail gun or something like that. So it's not really recognizable as a gunshot through the woods at that distance, but there still is noise.
Thank you, Kevin. Representative Knight has a question.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, and I appreciate it. First of all, thank you for your business in Georgia. I didn't know that you had the armory there. So,
thank you for letting me
where
pay
you
lots
located?
of taxes.
No, hey, no, I'm all about it.
It's currently in Lawrenceville.
Lawrenceville.
I'm no longer with the company as of December.
Okay.
But in Lawrenceville, next to the new Braves AAA Stadium. We're on the same piece of property.
I appreciate that. I have had the opportunity to probably shoot. I've shot both a suppressor, and I've also shot a gun with a suppressor, and then one with a suppressor and a subsonic ammunition. So I understand what you're speaking of. I guess my question is, and everything we're doing, and this is what I'm trying to get a hold of. Not against silent or suppressors should be the better word, but I've had a lot of people from hunters, from the hunting perspective, have called me up saying, where did this come from? This hasn't been as a big of an issue as all of a sudden it's become. And I guess that's where I'm having a hard, where's the outcry for this? I haven't heard it until this popped up within the hunting community. And look, I'm a big hunter. Most of these people on this committee are, or a lot of them.
It's a good question. I mean, I think the primary thing is the ignorance, which isn't stupidity, obviously. I mean, that's different. But with urban encroachment, I think is a big deal. If they develop a neighborhood next to my farm, they're gonna be very happy that I use silencers. And I think technology, the last 10 years, especially, we focused a lot on R&D and the technology of the silencers. So they've gotten smaller and lighter and better performance. And so lots more people use them. Our business, the last probably 8 years, grew to 50 to 100% a year. So there's just a lot more people with them. There's probably already 250,000 people in the U.S. that legally own silencers. This isn't, just a couple of gun owners. This is a lot.
But again, my question, this is where I'm trying to go back. We're sitting here in the Game, Fish and Park Committee.
Yes, sir.
And again, we're looking over hunting regulations. And, of course, I'm fine with suppressors. Again, Second Amendment, absolutely. I mean, 100%. But the application of those within the hunting, that's where I guess I'm wondering. I haven't heard that much as far as a constituent call me up per se, and I would appreciate nobody in the room, hitting a button and sending the email.
Yeah.
But honestly, I mean, from a perspective, I haven't had a constituent or a hunting partner or friends that my folks that I deer hunt with. This has never been a conversation before, so I'm just sort of wondering where this has come from, and that's my simple, I guess, question. And again, nothing that's worried about the application within
No, I
hunting,
understand.
so.
Well, I would think a lot of it is ignorance to the law. I think a lot of people are unaware that you can legally own silencers, even a lot of shooters. I hear it when I go in my local gun store and stuff like that. That's what I would think is just that ignorance. But I can't imagine a situation where the government shouldn't encourage people to use a muffler on their firearm, just like with your car. I mean, it's permanent hearing damage every time, you or one of your friends shoots without it. Which at some point, taxpayers will probably be paying for hearing aids and that sort of stuff. But just from a personal, hearing and safety issue, anybody that's, and you said you've shot a gun with a silencer, anybody that I know that has done that, anytime you shoot, you want to use a silencer. And to me, I'm just getting into hunting now because my son's into it. And, yeah, I can't wait for this because I don't like shooting guns without them. It just doesn't make sense to me. It's just like taking the muffler off my lawnmower.
Representative Pruitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One quick question. I believe you said that we've been under the same law since 1934.
Yes, sir.
Why in 1934 did they decide that this is something we needed to do?
I think it was the fear of poaching. Bonnie and Clyde. I think it was Game and Fish. And the thing is, I think it was a lot of misconception about the silencers and how quiet it makes the gun, and not understanding that supersonic bullet flight, it's not silent. I mean, and this is an extensive background check. It takes 6 to 9 months. The ATF has to approve it. You have to pay a $200 tax. It's not something. I mean, if you're a criminal, you're going to poach. Is sort of the way I feel about it.
I just was curious, sorry, Mr. Chairman, follow up, but I was just curious that evidently in 1934 there was some reason that this was put into law, and I just wondered what that was. And that's something that we have overcome as the world changed to make us go back and retract it. I'm not for or against. I'm just curious why that happened. But obviously you don't really know the answer to that, but you just assumed it was poaching.
That's my assumption. But I think with the population, urbanization now, that it makes a lot of sense. And as far as the human population and the animal population seems to be still out of control in Georgia as far as deer go.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Donahue, we're working on that 2 hours. Go ahead, though.
Thank you for your time. We were talking about the decimal level, 160 to 165, 130 to 135, roughly, with the suppressor. What about if we're talking about magnums, like a 300 Magnum, the bigger magnums? Is that going to bring it to where it's still above the threshold of the 140?
Well, no, sir. A good silencer will bring it below 140. We made suppressors for a 338 lapua Magnum and a 300 Winchester Magnum, and it's still just below 140 decibels, which is still, extremely loud. It's an impulse noise, and being so fast, the rise time, or the way it's measured as far as duration, that you don't suffer permanent hearing damage. But if it were, a second long, you would.
So in other words, you're basically just hearing the loud noise, not the percussion of the shock right when the the gun's fired.
Yes, sir. That's right, because you're controlling the explosion at the muzzle of the gun, which is really what damages your hearing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One last question from Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just got a quick question. You mentioned that there's been a lot of technology changes in the last 10 years when in relation to the suppressors. Is there any pending technology out there that could really take this even further as to truly make these weapons, these hunting big game rifles, truly silent or close to it?
No, sir. With supersonic ammunition, it's impossible. I mean, you defy God's physics. If something goes over the speed of sound, it's going to break the sound barrier and generate the sonic boom.
So in your opinion, you think that the technology's pretty much gone as far as you can go with it?
Sound, yes, sir. With sound with high-powered rifles. The hope now, and where we've made big strides the last few years, are smaller and lighter, and the durability is much better, so they last longer. But you're not you can't get the sonic boom quiet or the sonic crack quieter than it is.
So a lot of the new technology is mainly geared towards making it smaller and more easy to use,
yes,
rather than just making them more silent.
Smaller and lighter. The big push the last few years has been to help to eliminate muzzle flash, but that really doesn't have anything to do with hunting.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Kevin, thanks for bringing your expertise to this issue. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you guys for the consideration.
Senator Bullock, the only thing I was thinking about that when Kevin said you can't buy anything now without a muffler on it, it's a Harley. I think Harleys come now without mufflers on, the ones I hear do anyway. I'd like to have one so it was real good and loud and had that good throaty sound to it. One day when I grow up, I'm going to get one. We have one more speaker, Senator Bullock, and we appreciate it. I know you have appropriations, a couple of them to be at, so thank you, and we appreciate you agreeing to having a hearing today, and we appreciate you bringing the bill, and we look forward to working with you on it. We have one last speaker, is Representative Chuck Williams, who's going to speak to the issue, but he will speak to it today as a private citizen, so we appreciate him in his capacity in this House, but also in his capacity as a private citizen. So,
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Williams, we'll let you speak now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chuck Williams from over in Oconee County. I appreciate the opportunity. Senator Bullock, when I first heard of this as a landowner, my wife and I are fortunate to own several hundred acres of timberland in Green and Oconee, and we manage it intensively for both wildlife and timber production. I was first hesitant, particularly because of the poaching issues, but I've learned a lot about suppressors over the past several weeks, and I'm coming to terms with a lot of that. As a landowner, the one point I would like to make, I think out there in the sportsman community and the hunting community, there's particular concern among deer hunters or deer managers who are exercising quality deer management. And for those of you that are not familiar with it, that is the premise that you manage a deer herd for health and balance. But one of the premises of quality deer management is that you seek to let younger bucks grow to an older age to become a more mature animal and therefore have more antler growth. And really all it takes to undo a quality deer management program, and in my case with 500 acres, I can't control the deer that wander on and off of my property, but with neighbors we have a quality deer management cooperative that encompasses several thousand acres, so we are having great success with growing bucks into an older age class. My concern, and a lot of the folks that I interact with are concerned about what I would, I guess, call the professional poacher, the person that is a professional that will really go to any lengths to harvest illegally a quality animal like that, and the damage that they can do to a quality deer management program. And from that standpoint, I would just like to ask us to consider, Chairman Bullock, you mentioned that you had bumped the penalty, the revocation of hunting licenses, I believe, from 2 years to 3 years. I certainly support that. Chairman Burns, I would just like to ask us as a deterrent to those who, I admit they are already lawbreakers, but I would like to see us with a penalty there more burdensome to them, 5 years, 10 years, or maybe like the NCAA has, a death penalty that basically says, seriously, Cousin Al, if you use a suppressed weapon to poach illegally, the state revokes your hunting licenses for the rest of your natural life. Let's send a strong message that this is a tool that we intend to regulate and regulate closely. If someone's going to abide by the law, they should not have a problem with us having a real severe penalty. So I would just ask that the committee consider that. Thank you.
Thank you for that testimony. Cousin Al.
Yeah, don't leave yet.
I'm at your mercy, sir.
Thank you, sir. To my cousin by another mother and and fellow member of the Williams Caucus.
You got it.
Some things you said were very interesting. Having followed deer hunting a while now before you got here, we had some interesting discussion about the chase of the buck. So you want to see some real strong penalties for poachers.
Particularly for the illegal use of a suppressed weapon.
Okay. With the kind of acreage you have, you're not going to miss 2 or 3 good bucks out there.
Well, cousin, actually you will, because that is one of the premises of quality deer management. People say, well, why do you care? You know, that they get hit in the road all the time and whatnot. One of the premises of quality deer management is sort of like an inverted funnel. As those deer get older, due to genetics and nutrition and whatnot, it really takes an exceptional animal to reach what quality deer managers are looking for. So while there may be 20 buck deer on my and my neighbor's property, there may only be 1 or 2 that are really the goal we're managing for. And if someone comes in, whether it's with a suppressed weapon or not, in the dark of the night and takes that animal out, several years and many thousands of dollars of work that we have put into managing that deer herd have gone away because they have taken the cream of the crop.
Thank you, sir. This thing's much bigger than I thought.
Thank you. Any other questions?
No, I think that's a
Thank you,
discussion y'all can have at the family reunion next time y'all have one. Y'all just finish that one up there if you don't mind. Thank you to all that committee for your attention on this matter. That will conclude our discussion on Senate Bill 301. Thanks to Senator Bullock. Absolutely. You still work on that 2 hours. I knew you couldn't give up. Come on, Senator Bullock. We appreciate you, Mr. Chairman.
Never put a microphone in front of a politician. Chairman Burns and committee, I appreciate y'all indulging in all of this today, and it's a very serious subject, and Representative Williams, in his comments just then about a more severe penalty, being a property owner, I support what he's saying. I support that you lose your hunting privileges if you poach, period. Doesn't have anything to do whether you use a suppressor or not. That to those of us that are property owners, that's a major issue, people that poach. And I don't even like people that trespass. And you know, there's no law against having a suppressor on a gun that you shoot one of them with. The law is just against shooting them. So thank y'all again.
Excuse me, one of the trespassers? There you go. I like that law.
Thank you, Senator Bullock. We're glad you came back for that one, Mr. Chairman. Thank y'all for all who did participate. We're going to move on into Senate Bill 319. I know some of you have some other responsibilities you need to attend to. So, Senator Jeffers, if you'll take the mic. And Senator Jeffers, I think what we agreed to was to work off the sub, and you.
That's correct.
We're working off Senate Bill 319, but there's a sub that has been offered. You should have it in your packet. It's LC 400171S. And what we're going to do, we're going to work with Senator Jeffers. Will work off of his original language, and then Representative Spencer has some language that's been added in, and we'll hear from him also after Senator Jeffers presents, and maybe have a question for him. Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. I guess after that, this is going to be pretty boring. But in the original bill, under a different title, 52, the DNR commissioner is authorized to regulate boat operation and other activities on public waters of the state. Under Title 12 of this bill, there's all kind of specific language about types of boats, activities, times at parks and lakes. And so what I'm trying to do is to clear it up where the DNR commissioner will just have control of all state parks, state waters, like it says in Title 52. And that is simply all it does.
It's pretty straightforward. A question for the senator. Thank you, Senator. We hope
Thank
you'll
you.
stick around just
I
for a
will.
minute. Is there anyone that needs to speak to that portion of the bill? It's pretty straightforward again. Representative Spencer, you're good at right here. You don't have to get up, I don't think. You're on 16. Representative Spencer has some language that he would like to discuss that is a part of this sub.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This language comes from House Bill 1064. House Bill 1064, as went through the Natural Resources Committee, what it does is essentially redefines what we call a liveaboard restriction. And on the coast, Georgia has the only law on the eastern seaboard that you can only live on your boat no more than 30 days in one calendar year. Many other states, coastal states, they're allowed to go and dock at marinas. That's a lot of tourism dollars that those coastal communities take in. This is essentially an economic development bill, a tourism bill, and essentially what the language does is it makes the days go from 30 in a calendar year to 90 in a calendar year. No language was changed from the original 1064 bill. It does deal with Title 12, and also we had to go into Title 52 to change the definition of the liveaboard restriction so that those code sections were consistent with their language. That's essentially what it does. I did pass around a letter from a lady in St. Simons who talks about the Great Loop, and the Great Loop extends from the Great Lakes, and they travel all the way down to the Gulf Coast. With Georgia having this 30-day restriction in a calendar year, Georgia has a bad reputation, and as a result, most boaters will just pass on by Georgia and will not stop in and won't stay a while and won't spend their money in coastal communities. This is a very important bill for coastal Georgia. This is good for tourism all the way from Savannah to St. Mary's. So, if you got any questions, I'll take them.
Any questions for Representative Spencer? A little bit of background on the language. Representative Pruitt will carry this bill, I think is correct. In the House, the original language and discussion with him and Senator Jeffers and Mr. Woodard, this is language I think that to inform the committee that is not objectionable to the department. Is that correct? And also had conversation with the governor's office. I think everyone is okay with this language and could be supportive. Are there questions from anybody for Mr. Woodard or for Representative Spencer or anyone concerned on this one? Representative Jaspers.
Mr. Chairman, I had just a quick question. Just thinking about this is changing significantly, the access with boats and all these different lakes. I guess this to the department. Are these listed prominently so people know them? Say if I'm in Jasper and I want to ride down to where I was had done something in the years previous. How do y'all go about notifying the public to make sure they know that these are out there so they don't ride down and be disappointed?
Director of Parks, Director Kelly, I think is the appropriate one to answer that question.
Chairman, thank you very much. Representative, we'll be posting the operational hours on our website, and we also make notifications through Facebook and tweet. So we'll be making sure that through the social media as well as through our websites, and it'll also be posted at each park. So hopefully the information will get out and people will know that we've got our parks, lakes ready for everyone to come enjoy.
Representative Pruitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First off, this is not a question, but I just noticed that Representative Jaspers was kind of evasive on what he actually did previously, I think was the way he put it. I just wondered, but anyway, I'll skip over that subject. We'll talk later about that. But this is truly a economic development bill. I mean, this really is something that we promote in Georgia heavily, and I can see it as being an advantage to help economic development in our state. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. I know of no one better qualified to make those comments than you because you've had made a tremendous effort over the last years to bring about. No further questions. The chair would entertain a motion on this bill. What's the wishes of the committee? Representative Donahue.
I'll second it.
Would that be a motion of due pass?
Yes, sir.
That'd be a motion of due pass from Representative Donahue. Do I hear a second? There's a second from Representative Bruce. Thank you. We are now, of course, we're talking about LC 400171S, substitute to Senate Bill 319. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Senator Jeffers, we appreciate your patience, and we appreciate the bill, the substitute, and we look forward to working with Representative Pruitt as he takes it through the process. Thank you, sir. And we know you'll be always on call to stand by to help that process. Thank you, Senator. Where we have especially two of my a good friend, Senator William Ligon, but one of my best new friends, we have Will Ligon with him today. Will, you bring your dad on up if you don't mind. And Senator, we'll hear from you on now. You and I had some discussion about Senate Bill 307 and 464. What's our posture there at that point in time?
And I apologize for being late in getting this, but I got these this morning. But I wanted to combine the two bills because one deals with crabbing, one deals with a fishing license, a shore-based fishing license. I think it makes sense to run it through that way unless there's any reason not to.
Yeah.
And I have an amendment that just takes the fishing license bill and makes it a part of 464 since we haven't passed a substitute bill out. I don't know how you wanted to handle that.
Do you have that amendment with you?
Yes, sir. I do have that with me.
Do we have any copies of that? Can we?
I
if you don't mind. Senator, if you don't mind, Senator Woodard, excuse me, Senator Woodard, Spud. I don't know if that's a promotion or not to the Senate. Now, wait just a minute. In all respect, do you see any problems with us discussing it in that format?
No, sir. I think that's a procedural matter. The content remains the same. So I think for efficiency,
that's right.
That's procedurally correct.
Legal counsel, do you foresee any problem with us proceeding?
There's a prohibition on having bills with multiple subject matters, but the bar is really, to fail that standard, it would have to have no logical connection whatsoever. They both deal with licenses, just think it's okay.
Think it's okay. Okay.
Why don't you go ahead and while we're looking for the amendment to come back, we'll hear from you.
Okay. Thank
and
you.
you'll use 307 as or which one are you going to use as the vehicle?
The 464 would be the vehicle since it's the longer bill.
Okay.
And
is everybody on? Before we get into this discussion, does anyone on this committee object to streamlining the process? I'm sure Chairman Meadows would certainly be okay with this. I feel certain.
That was the idea, just to try to streamline it and make it work a little bit.
And certainly,
more
these are two issues
so.
that the department is okay with. So I think it enhances the chances of making things better. So,
yes.
Senator, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I represent the 3rd District, which is down on the coast and includes Camden, Glenn, McIntosh, Brantley, and Charlton County. And 3 of those counties do front on the ocean, and we do have a lot of crabbers. And some of the crabbers came to me and talked to me about a bill which would increase the penalties for those who would be stealing out of their crab traps, in particular crabbers stealing from other crabbers. And as we started moving along with that bill, then the department had an interest in making some modification for the crabbing licenses, and they asked if we could incorporate their suggestions into the bill, and so we did. So that's basically what 464 does. If we'll look through the bill, the first part is beginning in line 38. The total number of outstanding crabbing licenses will not exceed 100. Right now there are 133, And this level would be reached through attrition, just as people surrendered their licenses or they got out of the business and didn't sell. So that's how that goal would be attained. It's not anything that needs to be done right away, but just over a period of time, it would be they would drop. Also, it provides that licenses may be sold for consideration. And what you find is that sometimes crabbers, when they want to retire, they want to be able to sell all of their equipment, their boats, their crab traps, and it just facilitates that transfer if you're able to transfer a license with that. And that is their life savings, their life investment. And if you can't have a license when you sell your traps, they're not really worth anything. So the crabbers are really anxious for that. It also provides some clarification and procedures for the transfer of a license in the event of the death of a crabber. And it requires a document from the court, an instrument from the court, declaring the rightful heir or recipient of that license upon the death of the holder of the license. Also, there's a little clarification of a person registering the license within 30 days of the license being transferred. Then over beginning on lines 85 through 93, we see the increased penalties for stealing crabs from the crab trap. On the first offense, the license would be suspended for a period of 3 months. On a second conviction, 6 months. And then on the third conviction, the license would be permanently revoked. And so that is the essence of 464. And I can, Mr. Chairman, however you'd like for me to go, if you want me to take questions on this, if there are any, and then talk about the fishing license, or however.
Yeah, let's clarify one. Let's get this one first.
Okay.
Representative Bruce.
Yeah. What is the purpose of issuing a license in the first place if we are going to transfer it to somebody else?
Well, the license is a management tool that the DNR uses to manage the crabbing fisheries, and they know how many people are actually harvesting the crabs. They can keep track of that because you don't want that fishery to be over harvested, and then we damage our crab populations. And there's so many things that can affect that, including weather and rainfall, and some of the drought conditions that we've had over the last few years have really put some stress on the crabs. And it's part of a management tool, and I think I'm speaking that.
So there's no character issues associated with it?
Well, crabbers are usually characters.
Well,
yes.
Well, but I'm just saying, you were just talking about people stealing each other's traps and all that kind of stuff. I guess I was trying to understand.
Every once in a while, there are issues with that, and I think it's very frustrating to crabbers because it is very hard work, and you're out there in all kind of weather, and sometimes you have individuals who aren't crabbers stealing from those traps, but sometimes you get a few bad apples, and they'll harvest crabs from their own traps and then from someone else's traps as well, and that's what we're wanting to address. So,
Coastal Director is here with us. He might can shed a little bit of additional light. Of course, the Senator did an excellent job.
Did a great job of characterizing it. One of the biggest challenges in the crab fishery is that they're not assigned territories. In other words, if you look up and down the coast, they pretty much have staked a claim to a territory to put their traps, and they move around in that territory based on the environmental conditions and the behavior of the crab. And one of the things that led us to actually creating what we call a controlled access fishery, which is a finite number of licenses, was to minimize that competition, and so that each crabber could be prosperous and not engage in these kind of conflicts, which are very wasteful, not only in human terms, but also in terms of the resource, when they get into feuding over territory and cutting trap floats and things of that nature. So
right, and that's kind of where I was going with this. If that is the case, and there are people who are trying to get into this business, and there's not, there's no licenses, no new licenses available, so to speak, to them, because you've reached the finite number that you're going to issue. Is there no waiting period? In other words, if I decided that I wanted to do this, I couldn't do it because there's no traps. But if I go to him, I mean, there's no licenses. But if I go to him and I buy his,
Right.
then I can jump ahead of a whole bunch of other people who might have been trying to get this license but couldn't get it because it was filled up.
Well, what we're doing, the 100 number came from the fact that really we have about 80 true full-time crabbers in the coast. And right now we have 138 licenses out there, and a lot of those licenses are being held by families strictly for the purpose of keeping that effort down. And what we expect is if this bill were to be passed and go into law, there'd be several of those people who would voluntarily surrender their licenses back into us. But 100 is still going to give us some room in there for fluctuation and growth in the fishery, because the last thing we want to do is have an unregulated amount of effort that just causes more conflict. But you're right. I mean, the way to get a crab license is to go buy it. I mean, it becomes a commodity that is competed for. But just to give you an idea, I mean, we're not talking about something for $100,000 here. Most crab license transactions are in the order of $2,000 to $5,000 is about what you're paying to get a crab license.
If, from what I've heard of this will actually, Senator and Mr. Director, also help address the problem Representative Bruce is discussing to make it a little bit simpler and take care of that problem where some more people legitimately could enter the business.
That's right.
It's a good question, Representative Bruce. Thank you. Any other questions on this part of the bill for the Senator or from the Director? Senator, if you want to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Now, what we'll proceed with now would be the language in the amendment that you're offering.
Yes, sir. Yes,
which
sir.
is AM 400013.
Right. You know, unless Mr. Chairman and Legislative Council pointed out something to me that unless you think one of these bills is going to be so controversial that it might kill the other, which they weren't in the Senate, and I assume that they wouldn't be in the House.
I defer to your judgment on that, but you know, I don't know about in the Senate, but in the House you never can tell. Depends on how you conduct your business, how you vote probably between now and the next few days. But no, I don't foresee anything like that.
Well, why don't we combine them for efficiency's sake? The second bill, we have some piers in our district, and right now you can buy a 3-day hunting and fishing license for $20. But if you're wanting to come down, you have tourists and they want to fish off the pier, and you have a family of 5 or 6, and you want to do that for an afternoon, well, you're not going to spend the money. You're not going to buy bait. You're not going to rent the tackle in order to go fish off that pier. And so what this does, this creates a saltwater shore-based fishing license for 1 day, which you can purchase for $5. Now, it's not a 1-day fishing license for $5. It's limited to saltwater and to the shore. So you're not going to be out on the boat in the rivers, you know, out in the marsh on the coast fishing on this license. You'll have to use it off of that pier. And it's just to try to promote fishing for our piers and those who have those businesses to sell bait and tackle, to encourage people to come down and fish and vacation on the coast.
Thank you, Senator. That was a very good presentation. Representative Pruitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One thing is, I know this is a real concern. I've even been down to Tybee Island where people come from all over the United States and the world, and they're only going to be there for 1 day or want to spend 1 day fishing, so this certainly helps, and I understand that. I've got a question about, I don't know, maybe it's already in current law, but what about children and the age when the $5 kicks in?
I believe if you're under 16, you don't need to have a fishing license now.
And this doesn't change that?
No, sir.
Okay. And I want to go back, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, to the previous.
You have the floor.
If I can remember what it was, if I can find it. Okay, let me have a moment here. Oh, this is talking about commercial crabbing.
Yes, sir.
What is the status of the current law when it comes to just somebody doing recreational crabbing or crabbing and doing it for themselves?
I'll let Mr. Wood.
And does this affect that?
It does not affect it, but I'll let him talk about it.
The reason I'm asking is because it's going to be asked on the floor, I assure you.
No, sir, this has no bearing on recreational crabbing regulations. They're going to remain as they've been for the last several years. Quantities.
Can you tell me what those are?
Right now, I believe that each individual is allowed a bushel of crabs per day, and there's a variety of legal gear, everything from on a string with a handheld dip net to lift rings, plus a recreational crabber can use up to 6 commercial-style crab traps with their fishing license. And they have to mark those with a specifically colored float. So if you want to take 6 crab traps in your boat and you're going to be out on the coast for a day fishing for trout or whatever, and you want to put those crab traps out, you can do that. I just don't suggest you put them in the middle of a commercial crab trap if you want to get them back. But well, those are the general rules. There's the size limit applies to commercial and recreational harvesters equally.
Thank you.
And you won't be able to use a silencer on those either way.
No, sir.
Or a suppressor. Representative Knight, State Air Director, if you will,
yeah.
if you don't mind.
And just curious, again, we want all the access that we can get for folks coming to this state to enjoy our resources, especially the coast. I guess my question is, how much is the 3-day license versus the $5 one day?
The 3-day is $20.
Okay.
It's a non-resident license.
Okay.
So if you want to come down and fish for a few hours on the Jekyll Island Pier with your children, you've got to buy the $20 license to cover you for that one day. So this gives non-residents an alternative. Residents can get a much less expensive license, so this would have no conflict with resident fishing license sales.
Okay.
Unless they don't know how to do math.
Representative Dobbs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just out of curiosity. An individual who is crabbing, is he allowed to leave his crab pots out there all the time, or does he have to bring them in every day?
No, he's allowed to leave them.
You can leave them out there all the time.
Prescribed period of time. But most people that recreate the crab will bait them, put them out for a period of time, and gather them back up and keep them out of the water so they don't get lost to either somebody taking them or they get sanded in or something like that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Let's see. Representative Donahue.
Let me ask you a question on the recreational side. What happens if the commercial crabber decides to be destructive and tear up the recreational, and they're not just in the lane, but evidently he knows where the crabs are, that's why he puts them there. If you put them, how far do you have to be away from his lines?
There's no specified rule about the distance between crab traps. Now, there's legal language referring to the distance of the crab trap away from a fixed structure like a dock.
Right.
But there's nothing that prescribes the distance between the two of them. Now, if a commercial crabber was to vandalize a recreational crabber, then we've got sort of more broader, overarching laws that sort of affect that kind of thing for it to happen.
Other questions? Just a little bit of a side, but would you tell us about the crabbing industry in Georgia and how it affects the crabbing industry in other states and the contribution we're making there? Very briefly for this committee's benefit.
There's a lot of parts of the country that have a very renowned reputation for crabbing, like the Chesapeake Bay. Well, Chesapeake Bay does produce a lot of crabs, but over time the crab population in Chesapeake has declined. So what we have found is that there are a lot of crabs that are harvested in Georgia, both hard crabs and soft-shell crabs, because of the high value that they bring when they're exported out of the state, are actually trucked or in some cases flown to other parts of the country, like the Chesapeake Bay, and where they're sold. So it's we're talking about an industry that not just generates localized sales, but also is responsible for a lot of imported money that's coming back into the state from export sales. So it's changed a lot due to just the modern technology that's out there, and we have a few crabbers that have really been able to successfully exploit that market, which means there are people that sit down on the eastern shore of Maryland thinking that they're eating a Maryland blue crab and are probably eating a McIntosh County blue crab. But they taste the same, so they never know the difference.
Maybe we need to tag them like we do those Vade onions or something like that. That's right. But anyway, thank you, Mr. Director. We appreciate the job you do down there. Senator, is there anything else you'd like to finish up with before we consider the bill?
No, Mr. Chairman. I think that's it, unless we. Well, he's my fishing expert. If there are any questions that we need to.
Well, actually, he's the reason he's being heard today, Representative Bruce, because I don't know if his dad could have made it without Will being available here.
That's right.
I think our posture is that we need to consider the amendment first, and really the amendment, as we discussed, really replaces the language in SB 307. So at this point in time, we would consider a motion on the amendment of AM 400013. Do I hear a motion? Motion and a second. Second. All those in favor, let it nobody be saying aye. Opposed? Same. The amendment passes. So now we'll consider the bill, which is Senate Bill 464, LC 390101. Do I hear a motion? As amended. Thank you, Representative Bruce. There's a motion and a second. Do we hear a second? We have a second. All those in favor, let it know by saying aye. Opposed? Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr.
We
Chairman.
appreciate you being here, man. You come up anytime. We love having you over in the house. In fact, if you're going to be around tomorrow, come over and see me in the house for a few minutes, and we'll leave your dad over in the Senate if you're going to be around tomorrow. Because Will's grandparents are my constituents, and so we're always glad to have Will. Thank you, members, for your. We need the originals, Senator. And we thank you for your patience, members. Thank you for being here, and those in the audience, thank you. We're adjourned.